guys, welcome back to my Lost in Space robot build. So today we're going to be working on the legs and the waist, and we're going to be motorizing the waist. So we got a lot of stuff to do as far as just getting the structure built, and then of course the actual motorization, the wiring, and the electronics to get that all set up and ready to go. So we got a lot of work to do, so let's jump right into it. Here's the silicone legs I was talking about. So they're like a silicone, I don't want to call them rubber because they're really not rubber. They're made out of this really cool silicone material. Extremely durable and tough, and it will not crack and dry out because of the material it's made out of. So this is made by one of our club members. So very lucky to have this one club member. His name's Will Huff, and he is very famous in Hollywood. If you've seen like any movies with monsters in them, like aliens and things like that, you've seen his work because you know, he works for the movies, and he just happens to be part of our club, and he's a big Lost in Space fan also that, you know, makes these silicone legs. So his material that he makes it out of is superior to anything ever made for our robots, and he makes them in 3 different colors. He makes them in the lighter gray for the first season, and then the darker gray here for the second, third season. He also makes it in black if you just want black too. So, and he has the whole set, the legs, the arms, the neck bellows and everything, so you can get the whole package. Now the thing about it is he only does these runs every so often because he's a busy guy, and he just right now literally is doing a run right now of a whole bunch of orders that have been stacked up for years, like probably 5-6 years. So the problem is, like, if you miss his runs, then you have to wait a long time to get them again. So luckily I have a set already. I ordered a second set of arms from him just as backups in case I damage them or rip them while I'm doing the mechanics later on when we get to that point. So, but anyway, these are fantastic. They'll never rot and dry out. And he has a whole video on how he makes them, which is just amazing. But anyway, you can see it fits right over the waist plate right here. So this is what that sub waist plate does, basically. You can see it just like, it's like a, you know, fits right over the shape of that plate. And I just have to trim down on the inside here. There's some extra material like I have to trim off because I want this to lay as flat as possible. But then you can see it looks so good when I put it over the skeleton, the frame there of the legs. Now, what I did is I had to cut out between the actual leg portion and down here, which they call the knee portion, right? They're joined together. So Will joins them together, he glues them together, and then he leaves a gap there so they fit right in the knee plate. But they're solid on the inside, so you have to cut it out, opening on the inside so that you can get the, you know, supports through and the battery and everything else. So, but you can see how nice they fit inside the tread section because they're all club standards. So beautiful, just great. They're all dirty right now. I've got to clean them off because, you know, silicone attracts dirt and everything else. So I've got to get them all cleaned off and everything. They've been sitting in the closet for a couple years now. But yeah, so that portion is awesome and it looks fantastic. So what we have to do now, though, is we've got to get the top plate on here, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So basically what I've got to do now is I've got to get this trimmed out so this lays as flat as possible. And then what goes on next is the actual waist plate that you do see, which is this one right here. So it goes on top sort of like this. And, you know, it's got to be centered. Let me get the camera up a little higher so you can see it better on the top here. But basically it has to be, you know, centered on here correctly, right? So everything is lined up correctly. And this little screw hole goes in the right hand corner. That's where the tab goes for the locking plate, right? But the main point here is we can't just screw this down because we're screwing it onto a soft material here. Even though it's very thick and sturdy, the point of the waist plate is just, you don't really need this to hold up the legs. They're wrapped over and they're thick enough that they won't move. What we really want to have happen is this waist plate has to be first perfectly even, And it also can't be wavy, so we can't like tighten one side down, a little side over here, and then what happens is because of the cushion between the silicone, one's lower than the other. Now, it's ABS plastic, it's really tough stuff, and it's hard to bend, but you still could bend it if you just ran screws down, right, with a power drill, and then it wouldn't be level or even, and then what's gonna happen is the donut, which goes next to lock on here, is not gonna lay flat. And then from there, everything's gonna be crooked, right? So now is our chance right here to level things out. So as you go up from the bottom of the robot and you're building up, you know, things can start getting out of level because, you know, it's just tolerance. So the leg supports, etc. You don't visually see it, but they could be out of level. So when we get up to the waist portion right here, now's the chance to actually, again, do a second level out. And what we're gonna do is we are going to, first of all, we gotta cut out notches here for these slots right here for the locking studs that go down here and then lock in here, right? So they've gotta swing freely, so I gotta make sure those get cut out. And then what we're gonna do is either get some aluminum spacers or fender washers or something, but we're gonna basically fill up this gap in between the plate and the sub-waist plate, and then level it all out, and then it'll get all screwed down, but the waist plate will actually be on these spacers or washers sandwiched to the sub-waist plate, and this silicone will just barely be sandwiched, if at all. Like, I don't really need it to push any kind of pressure on the silicone at all. It can just stay as it is. I just need to take up this gap and then screw everything down and level that plate out. And then once we have this plate completely leveled out, now we know at least we're back to level again, and we can move up the robot, and guess what? Everything will be level when we get to the torso portion of it. So that's what we have to do. Now, once we get this all set, we gotta get somehow, once we get the donut on here, you'll see, we gotta get a motor in here somewhere so that we can actually make the waist move. And so this may have to come apart a couple times, but all we have to do to get below this is to basically unwrap the legs from the sub waist plate, let them fall down, and then we can take this top plate off and work on it, put it back on, etc. So there's a lot of on and off in this process as we go through this, but you know, as you can see now, it's really starting to look like the robot, right, on the TV show, because it's really coming together. So, and you know, again, this is kind of exactly the way it was in the series, right? Because a lot of the guys have fiberglass versions of this, and they look almost a little bit too perfect. Whereas the robot in the series, you know, the legs are always like one way or another because he was walking or moving and stuff like that. So this looks a little bit, to me, more realistic to the actual TV show. So the other thing we want to do is make sure that this center line is actually on the center line for the sub-waist plate. They should match. So where that indentation is right here, this line should be right in there also. So we'll make sure it's not twisted and it's centered. But other than that, that's pretty much really our next step. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to trim the top piece here first. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here, just flip this over here. There's some, in a couple of places, there's just a little extra stuff we got to trim off to make it lay as flat as possible. And then we got to trim out those routed spots in the corners here, just to make sure the studs can get down there. And then, you know, if we wanted to, what we could do is just get a washer and a screw, and just in, like, you know, whatever, 4 places here, just tack it down, or maybe just the 4 corners would actually be fine. And then this, you know, can't move around, but to be honest with you, it's you know, it's silicone, so it has high friction, can't really move from where it is, and it fits on the sub-waist plate perfectly as far as its perimeter goes and everything. So yeah, so that's our next step, and then we got to figure out somehow, I'm not sure, we might have to go to the hardware store, see if we can find some spacers or whatever. We're going to have to measure some stuff and see what the distance is, and then get the actually exposed waist plate mounted on here. Okay, we got a lot of this. Is all got to be washed here and cleaned up on the silicone itself. It's all dirty and everything. And then once we have the top waist plate in its final position and screwed down and we know where it is, we can stick the donut on, lock it in. That's what has the gear on it, the ring gear, and then we'll find out where or how we're going to mount a motor on this thing and see how that goes. So now we ran into one little issue here. These 4 screws, which are threaded into those steel cross members, one of them's like stuck now. It's like, I don't know if the thread's crossed or something, but now I hope it's not going to snap off on me because I'm having trouble getting it out. So now we got to figure out what to do there because we might have to, I'm not sure if it's going to snap off on us and then we're going to have a real problem. So always an issue that pops up sometimes, right? But we'll get through all this and then we'll come back as soon as I figure out how we're going to mount this waist plate. Okay, so I basically changed my mind a little bit on something. So when I made the leg supports, I made them a little bit shorter, about 2 inches maybe or so, than the height of the legs themselves. And the reason is because that gives what we call the squished look. So basically during the different seasons, the robot would have different looks to him, and one of those looks was a squished look where the legs were like, they were sort of more compressed, and they would bulge out a little bit and stuff like that. And it really was because in some of the scenes they actually had the actor inside where the treads were not on the bottom. They didn't film it, but his legs were actually sticking out where he was actually walking, whereas in this case it's the treads actually. So I was looking at it and I'm like, let me try the taller look instead, which is what you're seeing right here. So what it does is it raises it up about 2 inches or so, and on the rubber itself, this portion right here, right, doesn't get as squished down. You can see it's stretched out more, so it's more even going up the sides. So if you back up the video, you'll see what it looked like before, and now it's kind of what it looks like now, right? I like the taller look better. I thought I was going to go for the squished look, but you know, until you actually get something made and in front of you, you don't really know, right? So what I did here is to compensate for this is I took a 1x1 steel square tubing right here, put it on both sides, and I had another of the sub waist plates. I just happened to have 2 of them because when I was ordering parts, you know, sometimes I order 2 of things because I don't know if I'm going to make a mistake on them. So I actually did have another one. So the original one is still down below here, and this level right here, the second ring down, is actually around that. But the top ring, which has the lip on it, is now around this one, which I just stuck in here. And it'll basically automatically line up exactly because of the silicone positioning everything. And I just put 2 1x1s here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 basically, wood screws, screw down through the 2 ABS to join them together here just to lock it in position. And then I'll take the rubber and let it lay down on the side here, and I'll get all these bolts in here to bolt the top plate here and this bottom plate together. And that will make a solid connection right here. The other thing it does is it gives me a nice little depth right here that I can put stuff. So I can actually, I could actually mount the motor controller right here for the motor that's going to be for the waist, which is a great spot for it. And I could actually put, I don't know if the motor will fit in here, but I do have a nice little sort of like bowl right here now to put stuff in. So we'll know once we get the top plate on and everything. But that's going to be my next step. So I'm just going to temporarily screw this together. Then we're going to take this down and we're going to bolt this permanently to the bottom waist plate just to get it in position. We'll trim all this off here underneath here that's sticking up to get this in perfectly, and then we'll be ready to mount the top waist plate. So just keep that in mind when you're deciding on your leg height. I would go with the shorter leg height as far as the structure when you have them made, and then you can always, like I did, push it up with another sub waist plate, and then you'll be able to raise the height once you see what it looks like, depending which way you want to go with it. So that way you have, you know, two ways to go with it. If you have your leg supports made too high, you can't really do anything about it except maybe cut them down. And if you try to cut them down, you know, maybe they'll be even, maybe they won't, right? It's always difficult if you don't have all the right tools. So just keep that in mind, but you do have options. Okay, so here we go. We've got the second sub waist plate mounted now. We got basically four screws in each corner. And if you look very closely here, you can see all I did is I've got a couple of washers, 1 inch spacer, another washer on top of it, and then the screw at the top with a washer. And it just, you know, those are kind of like self-tapping screws, and they just go right into the hard ABS and they just pull it all together. This thing is super solid, like I can't pull it apart. And then what I did is I put these 1 inch on the front and the back, these 1 inch square tubings, which are steel. And so this is, you know, resting on that, obviously. So that's really all you need. They don't even move inside here because this is pinched down. So, but they're basically being used as supports across these areas, right? You know, right here. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I trimmed off all the silicone at the top here around the routed edges. So that's it. We're ready to put on the next piece, which is going to be the finished waist plate. And then once we do that, we can put the donut on and then see where the gear lines up and what we can do for a motor, because we can't leave this permanently attached until we do that. But this piece right here, this top one right here and this bottom one are now permanently attached together. Remember, it's just these 4 screws right here and here that hold it to the leg support. So taking those out and the whole main piece comes off the top there. And remember, I have quick disconnects on this that goes below, so those have to be connected back up too. But you know, that's really where we're at. So I'm gonna have to run to the store now. I did put the plate on the top here, and when I do that, obviously it's got to be centered and everything, but once it's on there, basically this gap right here is 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to go to the hardware store right now and I'm going to see if I can find some 3/4 inch spacers, or even if I can find 1/2 inch ones and do the same thing I did here, which is just use big fender washers to take up any gap I need. I'm probably going to do like 8 of them, so that'll have a really solid connection on the top here. And we will then get a level and make sure that it's level also all the way around. So this is our, you know, next sort of leveling point. And then we'll be all set to figure out how we're gonna mount a motor in here. All right, so now we have the waist plate, the finished plate centered where we want it. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna use some giant nuts here. I don't even know what size these are. I just went to the hardware store and measured the height of them, and then 2 washers on each side, and then pinch that between here. And what that does is just pulls it down just a hair to make it tight against the silicone, but it won't bend it or distort it in any way. So that's kind of what we're after. And so yeah, I've got 8 of those I'm going to put around that will support it. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to get these all drilled and mounted, and we're ready to try on the donut to see where the gear is going to be and how we can mount a motor. Because before we can wrap this whole thing up basically permanently, we've got to figure out where the motor is going to be and everything. So I've got the donut on the top here, just sort of laying in place right here. Don't have it totally locked in, but it's basically in the same spot it's going to be. And you can see the Lazy Susans on the top here, and this is where the rotation occurs, and then you can see the big gear right here on the inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this motor that we have here, and we're going to use this as our drive motor, and it's going to go basically right here. And what I've done on it is I've mounted the gear, which is just plexiglass, really thick, and I've mounted it on the hub right here, and all I've got to do now is get this basically mounted in here and then have the gears obviously mesh with each other. Now, what I've done with the hub to make everything sort of stay aligned is, if you notice, the gear edges just stick out barely from the hub here, but what'll happen is the gears will ride sort of on top of the hub as it's going around. So the ring gear, this will, when we put it in here, the hub is going to hit sort of the bottom inside of the ring gear too. It'll keep it totally aligned, and then we just adjust the motor. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use a straight piece of steel to mount this. Got this piece of steel here that we're going to put inside here, and we'll just mount it like, you know, four bolts to mount it in there. But you can see right here is where I made a little drawing of where the motor is going to be on. So the motor sort of like hangs off of it, and it's going to have 3 attachments that's going to mount it to this. There's holes on the bottom of the motor there. And what we'll do is we'll use washers between it and the plate to raise it up and down, right, to get to the exact height that I need it to be. So first we just have to get these holes drilled on here so we can get this motor mounted. And then we'll get this actually mounted inside. And what we'll do is we'll make it on the one end, it'll be a pivot. On the other end, it'll be slotted, so it's adjustable and you can move it sort of in and out, and then make the gear as either tight or loose against the main ring gear as you want to. And that should be it. So just a lot of drilling and moving things around till you get it in the right position. But however you mount it is fine. Now I've got lots of room up here. So on the top here, I'm gonna put the motor driver up here. And we've got 1 extra wire we're not using on this pack, which is perfect because we'll use that as our wire for the motor driver for this portion. So what we'll have to do is actually drill a hole to run the motor wire down underneath here and connect it to the bottom one of this wire I'm not using. And then this will be used now for the signal for the motor driver. And what we'll do is for the motor itself, we'll just tap into the feed that's coming up through the legs there, the 12-volt feed. And that should be good. So, and then the driver will take it from there. So it works out perfectly because we end up using all 6 of these wires through the slip connector. And, you know, 2 of them are signal wires, one for the motor controller for the drive wheels and one for the motor controller for the waist. So, yeah, and yeah, so I've got to get all this stuff together, and then I'll show you how I wired it up, and we'll come back and look at everything, and then I've got to clean up all the legs, and then we'll give it a test run. Guys, so here we go. We got the waist plate here permanently mounted now. I've got 8 connection points here with those spacers in between here, so it's all solid. And then we've got the sub waist plate and another sub waist plate that we've also put spacers in between, and that raised it up so that, again, our legs are more stretched out and has the higher look to it. Okay. Now the other thing we've done is we've gotten this motor right here, which has this gear on it. Not gear, I should say hub on it, and we've drilled 2 holes in it, which is what attaches the gear onto the hub. And then we have this steel bracket that goes across between the 2 sides, which we've aligned up. And then over here we have our motor controller that's going to control this one. Now this one is called a Siren. Same company, Dimension Engineering, as the other one I was referencing. This is just a single motor controller up to 10 amps, but it's basically the same exact thing. And the model is just called a Siren instead of a Sabertooth. So that's all the difference is. But it's still just a standard motor controller. And you can see I have the signal wire going down through here, and it connects to the bottom of this wire on the bottom of the slip ring. And then this one will come up, and this will be the one that will go up to the top here. So that's perfect because 6 wires, and they're all going to be used now. 2 for the motor controller, one for each motor controller, 1 pair for the master power coming up to the main body, and then a pair for the soil sampler trigger. So that's it. And then the power for the motor controller here just goes down, and I just spliced it right into the main power coming up here on the feed. So right below, underneath here, it's all hooked together. with quick disconnects again. So if I needed to, I could get this top section off. So this whole thing that you see on the top here, just by 4 screws basically would come off, and then I could get down inside the legs if I needed to do something like replace the batteries or do something like that. So, and that's pretty much it as far as that goes. Now the next piece is to get the donut on, lock it in here, and then attach the gear and test it out to see if it actually works. So that's kind of our next step. So let me get the donut on here, and then we'll get the gear screwed back onto the hub and we'll check it out. The donut on here, but if you can see here, here's the hub right here. And if you notice, when I spin the gear, it's just like literally like maybe a 1/16 or an 1/8 inch above the actual hub. So what's going to happen is we're going to take the actual gear itself, which goes on the hub, and you can see when it's on there, the gear is literally maybe a 1/16 inch below the top edge of the ring gear, which is perfect. So it won't be too far above it when we have to put the other piece that goes on top of here. So I just need to attach this little drive gear, and we can hook it up and test it out. Guys, so that's it. I've got this all finished up here now. So we've got this gear motor. This is a 24 volt motor, but we're going to run it at 12, which is going to slow it down. And you can see the drive gear here against the ring gear that's attached to the Lazy Susan right here. So, and all these studs sticking up here are then going to support the actual torso. We'll talk about that when we get to that point. And then down here inside, I've got the motor controller for this particular motor. And yeah, everything's wired up. I've tested it out, works perfectly. So on my Xbox controller, basically this joystick is for the tread section. This joystick right now does the waist back and forth. Although I may move it down to this keypad instead, it just depends. So I've got 3 sort of like controls here, and I actually have 3 sections on the robot. I've got the treads, the waist, and the radar section that all turn back and forth. So that's perfect amount. So we'll figure out which is going to be which. I definitely want to keep the treads on the right hand one here, and then these two will one of these will be waist and one will be the radar section. So in total we'll have 3 motor controllers in the robot, as far as, you know, being able to change the speed and direction of the motors with the motor controller. So we got that big one in the saber tooth down in the tread section. We've got the siren up here, and we'll have another siren up for the radar section. So it'll just be those 3, pretty simple. And they'll, you know, they all have just a signal coming into them, and you drive them from whatever you want to. Now right now I'm driving them from the Arduino board, but we also have this system from what used to be called Easy Robot, which is now called Cynthium, which gives you other controls too. And it's not like you can't have both systems running in the robot. So you can have multiple systems and control them in different ways. So one could be through the Arduino with the Xbox controller, but you could also use the Easy Robot Cynthium with voice control, and now we've got AI chatbots and stuff. So there's a whole series of stuff we'll be able to do once we get it all assembled. But right now we're just after the functional. Does everything functionally work? And so far, up to this point, everything does. And then you can see we have now our 6 leads coming up. That's going to go to the main robot. So you'll see on the next video, once we get the support section in here, the central support tower mounted, these will come up through here. And what we'll do is we'll bend it and then clamp it so that it basically will always turn in a round circle like that. And that's kind of how it's worked. So, and these are hefty wires. These are 12 gauge right here. So plenty of thickness to the wire, so we don't have to worry about anything overheating for those or anything like that. So yeah, and that's kind of it. So now I am waiting for some thumb screws to come in. I ordered some aluminum thumb screws, which is going to go here, which basically you screw that in and that's what locks this tab. So the waist, or the donut doesn't try to unlock when he's turning, you know, left or right and stuff like that. Although it's so tight, I doubt it could. And this is really just sort of visual effect at this point. And I also got some nylon washers that I'm going to put right below it so it doesn't scratch all the paint off here. But yeah, everything worked out really well. So let's take a look at it overall. All right, so there it is, all the way up to the waist. And, you know, we got the three main things functional. We got the tread section, which makes him mobile. Forward, back, left, right, spinning around. We've got the soil sampler at the bottom here. Now, the only piece I don't have finished is the door. I thought I would have it finished, and of course, I was doing the final clear coat on it, and what happens? Bugs. 2 bugs landed inside of it. So I gotta let it dry now, sand off the bugs and do it again. So that's the only problem with painting outside in the summer, bugs. And it's those little gnats that get in there. So anyway, so yeah, and then as you can see, there are the side panels now installed. They look fantastic, and it works so good with the magnets. The magnets are just strong enough to keep it on nice and tight, okay? So there's no gaps in the seam here, but at the same time, very easy to pop off if I need to. Now this side I probably will never need to pop off unless there's some kind of an issue. On this side, of course, is where the controls are to switch between battery and AC power. So this side I may have to take off occasionally. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So it looks really good there. And you can see the knees down here. Everything fits in perfect. And of course, then we have the actual legs themselves, which I have expanded them to make them, you know, the tall version. So they look fantastic. And then of course the finished waist plate here and what they call the donut, which is right below, which is basically the waist, is really what it is. Yeah, and that's what it is there. So we're, you know, kind of almost like halfway through the robot at this point, right? And everything works perfect up to this point, right? Now, I did just quickly test the central support tower to put it on the top here, and there it is right there. This was in a previous video, if you remember that, but what the problem is with it is these posts, these threaded posts that are on here, on the bottom here, of course, they attach with a nut on the bottom plate, and I didn't measure it, of course, because the motor, I didn't know how I was going to do the motor yet. So what's happening is the nut actually runs right into this motor right here, the gear and the hub. So I've got to move those posts in further inside the circle. So I'm going to have to redo that. And I did decide to redo a couple things on this to make it a little more lightweight also. So we'll get to that in the next episode. But other than that, yeah, we're halfway through, and now he's really starting to look like the robot from Lost in Space, right? So he's you know, coming together. And what's nice about it is I just power him up and park him in the corner and keep moving. Now he is getting tall at this point, so there's going to be a point where I'm going to have to start getting ladders or step stools, right, to reach up in areas, because I'm not tall enough for this robot, because he's starting to get big at this point. Measured it, and height wise right now it's 3 feet 6 inches, so 3.5 feet already, and I'm only up to the waist, right? So between the torso and the bubble, you're looking at least another 3.5 feet, so you're at least 7 foot, so between 7 and 8 feet tall when it's finally all said and done. So, but anyway, so we'll get this week, during the week, we'll try to get this door finally finished. It's been just plaguing me like you wouldn't believe. First time I painted it, and then it had a scratch in it, and then I had to strip it and do it again. And it's been just multiple times, and now I thought it was finally finished, and of course, a couple of bugs have to land in the clear coat. So, and sometimes you can't get them out easily. And then you sand down, and then you're into the paint finish, and now you got to repaint, and it's a whole big thing, right, when you're trying to do that in the summertime. So, but anyway, we'll get it eventually. We'll get it straightened out and fixed and get it mounted in there, and we'll show you its final operation of how it looks when the door is actually on it and it comes out from underneath the door. So, but yeah, so really happy with where we are so far. Alright guys, well thanks for watching my video here. We've got the legs done all the way up to the waist here. You can see how tall he is already on me right here. So he's going to be gargantuan when he's finally finished. But hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll be working on the central support section next. That'll be the thing where we can start putting some of the electronic sound system and everything else like that goes in there before the torso goes on. So as always, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, put your comments down below about this video, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace, guys.